Yeah, so much just resonated with what you just said.
Nice. I
Uh,
wasn't always sure I was making sense.
oh, it was so good. It was so good. Um, right now, when I feel my heart beat fast, it reminds me of what happened the other day, where there was something confrontational that happened with my mother-in-law,
Yeah,
and I could feel my heart beating so fast, you know?
yeah,
And and I've been noticing that more. I think I learned it from you to be more aware of like what my body is saying before I
yeah,
just like jump to like responding or like defending. That's what I
yeah,
noticed. Like I always want to just automatically just defend myself, you
yeah,
know?
yeah,
But it's so hard to slow down enough like to have that silence before you even speak anything, you know,
yeah, yeah, totally.
to feel it in your body. And with my kids too, like, you know, there's this automatic like um you got to do something. Something must be done, you know,
Yeah,
like
yeah,
this shouldn't be like this, you know,
yeah,
and it's just like this is so overwhelming. Like it's just this
yeah,
automatic
yeah,
call to action instead of just like, wow, like where am I feeling this right now?
yeah,
What's happening inside of me?
yeah. And it's so important to work out what's happening inside of you, because then it's easier to work out the best course of action, because your body inherently knows the best course of action. And if it doesn't, then the mind can ask questions. So the thinking mind can ask questions to update you to find the best informed decision. When you're just going off automatically, you're normally going off like past karma or habits, or like traumas, or what your parents or society have taught you. So you're normally going off default, which tends to be, because most people have identified with the body and identified with their chakras, it tends to be like negative rather than productive and positive for you. Unless you've had a lot of training, you tend to go into like fight or flight or freezing mode and go to your what you've been trained to do, which tends to be identified and from a negative perspective rather than an expansive perspective.
Hmm. Yeah. And so I'm noticing that with my kids and how much more beautiful our connection is when I'm not react, when I just slow down, you know, and
Yeah,
just like don't say anything to them because yeah, you can be so cruel from that
yeah,
place. Like you said, like this, just this negative, like
yeah,
then when you're negative and cruel, it's like this breakdown of the connection between you and your
totally.
child, you know,
Yeah,
and then also, you know, like allowing his big emotions, you know, both of them, they're so young, they're 2 and 4, and like this allowing of their big, huge, overwhelming screams. And it's like, I'm so conditioned to be like, you know, don't cry, or, you know, and
yeah,
I'm actually, you know, actually am aware of it. So I never ever say that to them, or I usually just allow them, I just say, I hear you, you know, I
yeah,
hear you. And like, but we're so conditioned to like, no, 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 no,
yeah,
don't feel negative, you know, like it's
yeah,
such a prevalent thing with like
yeah,
our generation. Like I feel like more conscious parents are happening, but like when you see it everywhere, you know, like don't feel what you're feeling. No,
yeah,
that would be the
totally.
worst thing right now, you know.
Yeah,
Don't embarrass me in front of these people. That
yeah,
like it's like so common. So I'm
yeah,
so grateful that I'm able to like, you know, you know, and sometimes like sometimes it gets a little tricky because it's like sometimes it's so overwhelming that it's like almost like draw like I have to draw a boundary sometimes.
yeah,
Like where
totally.
is
Yeah,
the boundary between like you're yelling at me right now because you're upset and like so, like my sister said, like if you're not putting a boundary down, you could just say like I'm just gonna walk over here instead of being like don't you
yeah,
yell at me. I'm just gonna walk over here, honey, until are less upset.
yeah,
But then my mind says, well, then I feel like I'm abandoning him, you know, like I'm a bad mom because I'm abandoning him, you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so it's a tricky thing.
Yeah, and I don't know with kids. I only know with dogs. So
Hmm.
I've never had a kid. Um, I mean, I used to work with like young adults that had emotional behavioral disorders when I was in my early 20s. but I don't know. I'm sure it's incredibly complex. I just know with dogs, like I've always had dogs.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I can only relate to that through like the dog, like when the dog does things or crosses boundaries. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I feel like that there can be, like you said, if you're going to keep giving the child candy and whatever, like they're going to end up this way. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? So sometimes it's like there can be a healthy boundary. There
Yeah.
can be like
Totally.
a, oh, I love
Totally.
you and I'm not going
No.
to let you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
instead of like a don't you dare talk to me.
And I think when you slow it down, your body does know those places. But sometimes it's really difficult to do that. Like I was when you said that about embarrassment, I was out with a good friend of mine like 6 months ago, and he took me out for dinner, and I took Khaleesi. Like it was in France and it was warm, so we sat outside and had dinner. And I hadn't walked. It was all my fault because I hadn't walked Khaleesi prior to it. So when I went to the restaurant, it's like going with a loaded gun. I'm sure you can, like. So it was like she
Yes,
was
when kids are
so
tired or
yeah.
hungry, you don't take them places. Yes, same
Yeah,
thing.
yeah. And so she was like a loaded gun, and like everybody that went past, she had to bark at. And normally she doesn't do that. She just sits and lays down like quietly in a restaurant. And like I remember at one point, my friend just wet themselves laughing because I turned to her and went, "Khaleesi, you're embarrassing me." Like it was like this little kid went past that was like 5 years old. And she's like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah," this little kid, and I was like, "Oh God!" And in the end, I had to get up and walk her, like so I had to leave the meal and like walk her around. But when you slow it down, your body does know the right responses. Like to me, in that situation, that I knew that was all my fault. Like I hadn't had enough time to walk her, and I shouldn't have taken her out for a meal. Like that's unfair to put that expectation on the dog. But if you're in that situation, you're not conscious of yourself and you're not realistic with yourself. I can imagine like a parent or another dog owner would take it out on the dog, and it's really not Khaleesi's fault. That doesn't mean that I'm like praising her for being inappropriate, but it's like I know that what I have to do is I have to run off that energy. She needs to be exercised, and and the body knows that. Like I knew that that's what the problem was. And when you slow yourself down enough, you can find these solutions and these ways in which to be expansive in that situation. I know it's way more complex with a kid, and I'm sorry that I can only tell a story about dogs when we were talking about kids. But and I really understand it's complex, especially when you've got two and you've got lots of emotions going on. But and there is this place where you have to say no and you have to put up these firm boundaries. But your body knows when to do it. It knows when it's doing it out of frustration and negativity, and it knows when it's doing it out of positivity and expansion. You know, when you're saying no, this is inappropriate, you have to take time out or whatever it is that you're experiencing.
Yeah, and yeah, like when you said that, like traffic lights, that was one of the things that I've been having to really, like, I've been analyzing that kind of like, oh, like if there's no choice and there's no bad or good and there's no should or shouldn't, then like I'm kind of just like letting life carry me. Like,
Yeah,
really? That's like it can be that like simple. Like it's such a shocking thing,
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
oh, like, oh, this is just happening and like
yeah,
it's just happening and like it doesn't mean anything. Like there's
yeah,
no should or shouldn't. Like I
yeah,
now I notice more like, oh, I just made that mean this.
yeah,
I just told myself a story that this means I'm stupid. Or like
yeah,
I'm noticing so many more things. Like,
yeah,
oh, there's a story attached to everything. Like
yeah,
every step, there's like, oh, this means this.
yeah,
When like in actuality, what non-duality is like, oh, it means nothing, and like it just will carry me. Like I don't
yeah,
have to make it the wrong choice or the right choice. I
yeah,
don't have to
totally.
think like, oh, I shouldn't do that because that means I'm a bad person.
Yeah,
Like I could just like, oh, just feel what I'm feeling and like let it carry me. Like
yeah.
really,
Yeah, so
really.
yeah, it's really beautiful. So in Buddhism, I never used to get this when they taught it at the time. I used to think it was something really abstract, but they used to call it stream entrance. So there was this point where like there's no return when you enter the stream, and your job is just to lay back and let the stream take you to the ocean. And it's like what's happening in you and what's happening in a lot of people that are listening is that you're beginning to come out of this mental conceptual world that you once lived in, where you're always imagining yourself and imagining what you should and shouldn't do, and you're beginning to lay back into a stream and let it take you, which is also like you're going into the body, you're going into experience, you're going into the natural responses of the body and just allowing them to flow, like trusting yourself. It's not really yourself because the body and the world are one and the same thing. So in a way you could say you're just laying back in life and letting life take you. And I feel like the chakras and the body are so important to this because these are your organic way, or the organic way of the body orientating. And as you become less identified with being someone, with being this mental image of you, then there's a sinking into the chakras, or sinking into the body, which is the world, and then a natural flow that begins to happen, which isn't something that's thought about or conceptualized too much. Sometimes conceptualization needs to happen. We're like intelligent animals. But a lot of the time, like driving a car, like your body knows how to drive a car. You don't have to be like indicator now, gear stick now. I don't know if you use it in America or you have the gear stick, but you don't, or brake now. You don't, sometimes you need to think about it, but most of the time it's just happening. The body is doing it. And the same with riding a bike, or if you do sports or dance.
It's such a relief, you know.
Yeah, totally. It's such a strain being someone. Yeah.
To think that it doesn't have to be so hard.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
And it's so funny that you use that you said that you mentioned that Buddhism thing, because I recently took my niece to swimming lessons and she was learning how to float, and I was brought to tears looking at her learning how to float, because there is this a complete surrender, you know, that happens when you're, and I thought, wow, look at, like, it was such a powerful thing to witness, to see her learn how to float, how to completely surrender. It moved me to tears.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's a similar thing.
Yeah, the separate self is like walking around with like all this like heavy gear, this backpack and all these bags it's carrying of what it thinks it has to be, with all these ideas, and it really is a weight of being this person, and it's such a liberation just to let go of that you don't have to be that you don't have to control this life. It's under control.
Yeah, also I heard it first from Roger, right? This is one of your teachers?
Yeah, Roger Castillo, yeah.
Oh, I heard from him first that, you know, when there's no choice, it's basically like, this was the first like kind of realization that I didn't have to feel guilty. Like when my children, like sometimes they fall, or, you know, they hurt themselves, or something happens where I attribute it that it's my fault.
Yeah.
So I feel so guilty because they're in pain, and oh, I didn't pick that up, or I let them play over there and they fell. And it's like, oh, I learned from him, where it's like, oh, that just, it wasn't my fault. It actually just happened. Like, you know, it wasn't my fault. I don't have to blame myself for it.
Yeah.
Where there would be so much guilt before, like when they would get sick, you know, like, oh, I should have had them wash their hands, or, you know, oh, I shouldn't have brought them to this place. Like there's always so much guilt. And then it's like, what to hear him say, like, oh, actually, has nothing to do with you.
Yeah, totally. It's a happening. Yeah.
I mean, in a sense it does. Of course, I still have to take precautions. Like I do have them wash their hands, and I do, you know, I do my best, but if it does happen, I don't have to be like, oh, wow, like, oh, I just want to kill myself because it's all my fault.
Yeah, totally. And the shoulds and shouldn'ts are just a way of like updating. Originally, they're just a way of updating your system to find and discover better ways of doing things. So say if you fall off your bike because you haven't like been checking the chain, and the chain's got a problem and it causes a glitch and you fall off. Afterwards, you could say, oh, I should have been checking the chain, you know, like once a week. And it's not that there is someone there that should have been doing that is guilty or is to blame. But what you're doing by saying, I should check the chain, is you're reprogramming the body mind to take more precaution in order for safety to happen. But it's nobody's fault. It's just that the should is a way of updating the system. So if your kids get sick from because you didn't wash the hands, the next time you know that washing the hands needs to happen. And that's a beneficial and good thing and a positive and empowering thing. It doesn't actually mean that somebody is guilty and that somebody's done something wrong.
Yeah, but we so associate,
Yeah,
like it has to be painful in order to learn the lesson
yeah,
almost. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like it has to be painful in order for it to hit home so that you remember next time to
yeah,
do the right thing.
yeah,
It's like
and
as if we don't make it a painful thing,
yeah,
then we won't remember and we'll just
yeah,
fuck up again,
yeah.
you know?
And that
So
and
there's
that
that
that's such a
noticing that like, oh,
yeah.
it doesn't have to be painful. I can just
No,
learn my lesson without the pain.
yeah, check it. If your attitude is right in that moment, that's actually a really positive and empowering thing in, say, the solar plexus. Like if you say it, so with your kids, like washing their hands after they've been outside before dinner, like you can actually feel that can be a really positive feeling in the chakra. It's like it's envisioning safety, it's envisioning good things for your kids, and it's like helping you guys. Like it doesn't have to be a negative of like, oh, you messed up, you made a mistake. Like in the right
Yeah.
attitude, it's a really beautiful thing. Like that we can
So
think
that's
and that we
from
can
that
do
place
these
of
things.
expansion.
Yeah, that's in a place of an expansion. So when you put it in the positive, and when you're not associating with past things or beating yourself up because you feel like you failed, it's actually a really expansive thing, because it's like a way of protecting your family and like doing good things for your family. It's all attitude. We're always taught, because we're being taught by people that are separate and people that are suffering, to put things into the negative, like you say, like hitting ourselves on the, like hitting ourselves or beating ourselves up for something. Like you're guilty. You can only learn a lesson through pain. Whereas whereas actually, if you're taught in the right way, you can see like mistakes and like difficulties are actually like an amazing lesson to help us grow as a society, as a race, and as an individual. And put in the right light, they can be really empowering and really expansive. It's just the way that we're trained. It's just training because we're trained from an identified negative mind that feels disempowered. So we just keep passing that on from generation to generation. Like as soon as separation happens, there's always a person that feels disempowered and feels guilty and feels shame and feels like it's done something wrong.
Yeah, so in that respect, like sometimes I think like if I just surrender and let it all, then kind of like then we won't stop bad things from happening, but that's just not true.
No,
you know?
and your attitude will change because like
because you're more motivated to what the good is, like you just
yeah,
said, like
yeah,
you're pulled towards the good instead of
yeah,
avoiding the bad, right? I get that,
yeah.
yeah.
So it's
Okay,
like
I just have one more question.
yeah, sure.
Okay. So, it, if my whole world and my whole life is just happening like a dream in my head, basically
Yeah,
through my brain, like you have said before, right?
yeah,
But how can that be if I die, then the story still continues for like
yeah,
my son, say, and
yeah,
for my husband and the other people. So they're in my dream in my head, but they also have their own dreams in their heads that are connected to my dream. Do you
yeah,
know what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah, totally.
So how can that be though? That's
Yeah,
the thing that I sometimes struggle with. It's because it's like, but yeah, like if it's all in my head, but when I die, like the world still exists. It's still here for everybody
well,
else.
we don't know that, so we can just come back to our first-hand experience. We don't know that there's other people with other experiences. We know them as experiences happening in our experience. So we don't know what happens when we die, and we don't know if other people are having an experience as well. They could be cardboard cutouts in this dream, like a dream at night. They could also be experiencing in the same way you are. So there's like, I don't know how many billion, 8 billion humans, and they're all having their own particular reality. So the way it goes is the brain doesn't contain consciousness. So if it is that there's like lots of us having different experiences, the brain doesn't contain consciousness. So we think that that our brain is conscious. So consciousness. So if you imagine a bag with a light in it, and you poke 20 holes into that bag, and then you put the light into the bag, you'll see light coming out of 20 holes. And that's exactly the same as what consciousness, I suspect, is doing with these 8 billion bodies. Like consciousness can look simultaneously through all these different bodies. And then these different bodies have their different dream. And there is, they are beginning to speculate in science that that the reality that you experience isn't a fixed thing. It's dependent on that which is looking at it. So it depends. So it means that that there isn't this one collective reality that all bodies are looking at. We're looking at the reality in which we're particularly experiencing. So I might be experiencing a school, and the other person, we're not even sure. It could be that they're experiencing like going through space. We don't know how much it's correlated. It seems like we're all having this collective dream, but at the end we don't know how it's all working. And so when you see your child, you only ever see him inside your particular dream as the body. Consciousness, we suspect, is looking from all angles. So consciousness is seeing your child from your angle, and it's also watching you from the child's angle. But but consciousness doesn't have a brain, doesn't have a body. So consciousness is just pure watching. And then your brain is interpreting your child. So it interprets the color of your child's hair, it interprets the child's behavior, it interprets what the child's doing, and it may even be projecting all of that, in the sense that the brain is modifying the way in which your child is behaving, or your brain is totally making up that there is a child there. We're not actually sure on that level, but it doesn't really matter. And then so it's these different perspectives. From the consciousness perspective, it's looking through all these different brains simultaneously, and then your brain is having your particular interpretation of the world. But from experience level, it's important to remember that you only know one consciousness, and you only know one particular experience, and we don't know if we don't know consciousness is looking through all these other bodies, and we don't know if these other bodies are actually experiencing like this body is. So you don't know that there is consciousness looking through your child. We just presume that's the way. So that's really funky.
Right. Yeah, so it's like the Matrix, kind of, right?
Yeah.
So when I die,
when you die,
he could still be here when I die or not. Well, I just am not gonna know. I don't know.
No.
And that's it. That's the end. Yeah.
But who you truly are will still be here. So your body will die, that particular perspective will die. So that will transform into something else, but consciousness will still be here because it was never rooted in the body. So there will still be consciousness. We don't know what consciousness will be experiencing if it takes another body, if it experiences as well for another body. We don't know how it will then manifest, but consciousness always remains, it's always here. What will die and transform is your body. So you will still be here, you as your essence, because consciousness isn't fixed inside the body. So consciousness
not
now,
as me as any identity at all. Just as an energy.
Yeah, it just is seemingly looking through. So it feels like consciousness is looking from the back of your head through maybe to the body, to the world, whereas actually consciousness is in all things that are appearing. So it's really spectacular. It's not, so when you die, consciousness will still be that. We just don't know what consciousness will be experiencing. Maybe it goes on to like a parallel universe or a different reality, we don't know, or this world, or look from an ant's perspective, or be reborn. We just don't know what will happen there. but consciousness doesn't die with your body. It will stay where it always is, which is right here, which is what is. Which is really, it just really contradicts everything that we project as a human and think of as a human. So it makes our brain like really dizzy, like, oh, because we just don't think like this.
Have you heard of the headless way?
Yeah, I have. Douglas Harding. Is that who it was?
Yeah, it's
Douglas
a
Harding.
similar thing where it's like, oh, this is not just coming out of my head. I actually don't even have one because I can't really see it without a mirror. This is all just happening.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice. That's another person I've got to put on my reference page. It's endless. Like I always forget to put these people up. He's a really beautiful teacher.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for talking to me.
With pleasure. It was lovely to speak to you. Yeah, nice.
Thanks for putting all your videos out. It's just really helpful. I appreciate it so much.
Oh, pleasure. Thanks for saying that.
Are you going to be in the US anytime?
I don't think so. I've become lazy in my old age with the internet. I've become lazier and lazier with traveling. So
yeah,
maybe at some point, but I don't think it will be a regular thing because I don't think I could be bothered to travel that much.
I hear you. Okay, well, I'll see you on YouTube then.
Yeah, lots of luck. Thank you.
Okay,
Bye.
thank you so much. Bye-bye.